When other people were playing on their computers and fooling around, you were studying, you were preparing yourself. And this is only the beginning of the recognitions that you will get for that. But I also want to congratulate the parents, because you know, it cannot be done without you. And sometimes, sometimes you have to be the bad guy. You can't always be the good guy. And scholars, sometimes you think your parents are being mean, and but they're not really. That's because they love you so much. I remember, I used to think my mother was really mean. And when she insisted that I learn my timetables, I said, why would anybody want to learn those timetables? They're printed on the back of the notebook. You can just look at it whenever you need. And she said, you cannot go outside and play until you learn your timetables. And if it had been today, I would have called social services and they would take her away in handcuffs. But back in those days, you had to do what your parents told you. And I got to tell you, I learned those timetables pretty quickly. But also, starting to read, and it really began to make a big difference. But the other group, besides the parents, that I really want to congratulate are the teachers. I have never met a successful person who couldn't point to a teacher that played an important role in their lives. And I just want to thank each of you. There have been so many teachers that played an important role in my life. I remember when I was in high school and I started going off on the wrong track and associating with the wrong kind of people. And it was Miss Schoenberger, who subsequently became Mrs. Miller. She absolutely refused to allow me to do it, and made my life miserable until I just stopped hanging out with those guys. And that probably had a huge impact. But the first really big impact was Mr. Jake, the 5th grade science teacher, who was the first teacher who thought I was smart. And my other teachers, some of them were nice, like my 5th grade homeroom teacher, Miss Williamson, but she just kind of felt sorry for me, so just thought I was really stupid. And I remember when I did start studying a little bit, and I got a D on a math test, and she was so proud of me. She just said, Benjamin, on the whole, you're doing so much better. She was just so happy. And I went home and showed it to my mother, and I was all proud, and my mother said, are you kidding me? This is boring. But those teachers play such an important role. Mr. Jake, said, you're smart. You can do a lot of things. And he started having me come to the laboratory after school, and helping take care of the different animals. But the really fascinating thing was the microscope. He had a microscope, and I looked at a drop of water under that microscope, and I was captivated with all the things that were inside of a drop of water. From that point forward, I could not pass any standing water anywhere without getting a sample and bringing it to school and looking to see what was in there. And that really, I think, started to stimulate my interest in science, in math. All those things began to change tremendously at that point. And then, with my mother's encouragement, starting to read. And I think that was the most important factor. Because even though we were very poor, between the covers of those books, you could go anywhere, you could be anybody, you could do anything. You could learn about anything. You could learn about people. As I read about explorers and scientists, physicians, philosophers. And I began to see a common pattern of successful people, recognizing that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you in life is you. It's not somebody else. And I stopped listening to the naysayers around who were always talking about all the people who were against and all the systems that were against you, and you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that. Those things began to fade into the background as I began to think about not what you can't do, but what you can do. And you develop that can-do attitude. And I can tell you, it really doesn't matter what else is going on around you. It doesn't matter if people are being unfair. It doesn't matter if the system is stacked against you. Once you develop that can-do attitude, you're going to be successful. Because you're going to find a way to succeed. You're going to find what around you benefits what you're trying to do. That's what can happen with every one of you scholars. You have been blessed with tremendous intellect. All you have to do is make sure you have the right attitude. The other thing that's so wonderful is that you've already demonstrated that you care about people. You know, this past weekend I was in Houston at the world's largest food bank, talking to the volunteers. And just does your heart so much good to see so many people willing to reach out and help others who are less fortunate. And I also went to a neighborhood in a Hispanic community where they were doing lead remediation in the older homes. Volunteers, and Lowe's was donating all the materials. Can you imagine what could happen in this country if people stopped fighting each other and understood what our problems were and started working together to get things done? Because we here in America generally are decent people. We're people who are willing to reach out. We are people who are willing to help. And the only problem occurs when we begin to listen to the people who do nothing but drive wedges between people on the basis of race or age or religion or income or gender or any number of things that are different. Why would intelligent people allow themselves to be driven apart by other people who are interested in the destruction of their country and their society? We each have a sphere of influence. We must be willing to stand up for the values and the principles that created this country in the first place. And as Dr. Oz was saying, that requires courage. Recognize that when you are courageous and you have principles and you begin to push the envelope or you begin to change things, you will meet resistance. If you're a person who just loves to bask in glory and never have anybody say anything negative, then don't do anything. You know, don't push the envelope. Don't try to change things. Just sit there. But will you really be doing what you were created to do? Would you really be realizing your potential? And don't spend a lot of time worrying about what other people are thinking, with your finger up in the air, seeing which way the wind is blowing. Very hard to get things accomplished. It's a good way to make sure that no one ever says anything bad about you, but it is not a good way to get things accomplished. If you look back through history at great people, what you generally find is that when they were alive doing what they were doing, nobody thought they were that great. It was only later when people recognized what was going on. So do not concern yourself about that. Concern yourself about one thing, and that is doing what's right. A lot of times you'll have all kinds of choices, but you can simplify your life greatly by just making the choice to do what is right. And then recognize that here in this country, we're all in the same boat. And if part of the boat sinks, the rest of it's going down too. You can never be gleeful or happy when someone else in your same boat is not doing well. When their part of the boat is flooding, it's starting to sink. Because eventually, your part of the boat's going to get there too. That's why we have to be united. We have to think as a nation. We have to be concerned about those who are less fortunate. Right now, we're in a situation where we have a tremendous problem with opioid addiction in this country. And believe me, it cuts across all demographics. Probably just about everybody in here knows somebody who has been impacted by that. They're not bad people. It's easy to get addicted. And we can't take a holier-than-thou attitude. We must recognize that that could easily be us. And we have to be willing to reach out and extend a helping hand to people who never intended to be in that situation. But you see, changes occur to the brain. Physiological changes occur to the brain, and they can occur quickly, in less than 2 weeks. But it generally takes at least a year to a year and a half to reverse those changes. We have to understand that as we approach them with real compassion, because they are resources in our communities. But when it really comes to compassion, we also have to look at the people who are coming after us. Those of us who are adults, and some of us who are even old adults, like me, recognize that we're not going to be around maybe 30 years from now. But let me tell you what will happen 30 years from now. At the rate that we are accumulating debt right now, in the year 2048, every single dollar that the United States government takes in will be used to service the debt, because we're accumulating debt at such a high rate. There will be no money for any program, not for the military, not for housing, not for anything. There are other nations who have known that they were heading down that pike, bankruptcy. And they knew 30 years ahead of time, and they didn't do anything about it. And it did happen. And it is devastating to everyone. And some people say that can't happen to us. It will happen to us if we don't begin to think about those who are coming after us. We have to reformulate, and we have to rethink the way that we do things. We just can't stick our head in the sand and continue to go down that road. And we're going to need a lot of you young people, smart people, to help create new pathways, new ways of thinking that will keep us from going over that financial cliff. And lastly, as I always say, think big. Each letter means something special. The T for talent, which God gave to every single person, you have plenty of that. please use it in your sphere of influence. Not only for yourself, but for all the others in that sphere. The H is for honesty. Lead a clean and honest life. Don't put skeletons in the closet. If you don't put them there, they can't come out to haunt you. And I found that particularly helpful in recent months. Because believe me, they're looking for the skeletons. They get kind of frustrated because they can't find any, so they start looking and making up stuff. But you know, the good thing is you have complete relaxation because you know that there's no skeleton there to find. The I is for insight, which comes from listening to people who've already gone where you're trying to go learn from their triumphs and your mistakes. Your parents, your aunts and uncles, teachers and counselors, they've already been through what you're going through. A lot of them have made mistakes. If you're wise enough and you're humble enough to learn from their mistake, you don't have to make that mistake. It's like you get to skip that space and you get to move further ahead and move further faster. You get to determine that. The N is for nice. Be nice to people. Because once they get over their suspicion of why you're being nice, they'll be nice to you. And you get so much more done when you're being nice. You know what? If you're not a nice person, I want you to just try it. For the next 24 hours, just be nice to everybody you encounter. Everybody. For the young kids in here, even your brothers and sisters, be nice to them. Because what you will discover is that it actually is easier to be nice to people than it is to be mean to people. And you feel better inside. And the next time you see somebody struggling with something, help them. Just reach out and help. Can I help you with that? Can I do this for you? Can I hold that door because you got all this stuff that you're walking through? Think about how nice that would be. The K is for knowledge. You've already got plenty of that, but you can never have too much. And the more you have, the more valuable you are to our society. Every single person in here is a resource to our country. And we need all the resources we can get because we only have a quarter the number of people that India or China have. We have got to develop our people. The B is for books, which is the mechanism for obtaining that knowledge. The I is for in-depth learning, learning for the sake of knowledge and understanding, not for the sake of taking a test. You're going to be going to college and graduate school. Don't be one of those people who just studies when a test is coming up. Make sure you have a thorough understanding of what you're doing. You'll do much better at it, I guarantee you. And the last letter, G, is for God. We live in a society that is attempting to get rid of God. I believe that that is a huge mistake. And godly principles work extremely well regardless of what you believe in. Godly principles of loving your fellow man, of caring, truly caring about your neighbor, of developing your God-given talents, those things that you do so well, so that you become valuable to the people around you. Having real values and principles that govern your life. It's not what you do when somebody can see you. It's what you can do when no one sees you that tells what your real values and what your real principles are. And if we do that, not only will we have a great country, but we will have one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and congratulations.